I want to be very clear about something before the story begins. I did not plan to run away with anyone's child. That was not on my vision board. My vision board had things like pay off student debt and finally learn to cook something that isn't pasta, kidnapping. Even the accidental, well-intentioned, technically illegal kind was not on there. And yet, but let me back up. My name is Maya Reyes, and at 24, I was broke. Freshly dropped out of a master's program I never wanted and desperately applying to every job listing that didn't require 5 years of experience for an entry-level position. You know the ones, junior assistant needed, must have PhD, must speak 4 languages, must not require lunch breaks, that kind of thing. The nanny listing appeared on a Tuesday, clean, professional, oddly formal, private household. 1 child, female, age 2. Compensation. Enough to make my left eye twitch with hope. I thought, how hard can it be? She's 2. She can't even reach the light switches. I was hired by email. I met my employer exactly once before my first day. In a glass-walled office on the 14th floor of a building that had a lobby so intimidating, I apologized to the security guard for existing. Elena Choi was 32, immaculate, and had the energy of someone who had never in her life been late for anything, including, I suspected, her own birth. She shook my hand without smiling and handed me a laminated document titled Household Guidelines and Schedule of. It had 17 pages. It had a table of contents. My daughter's name is Mia, she said, in the tone of someone reading from a report. She sleeps at 8. She eats at 7, 12, and 6. She is currently working through a speech development program, and I expect her exercises to be completed daily. I looked at the laminated packet. I looked back at her. She's 2, I said. She is advanced, Elena said without blinking. I almost quit on the spot. I didn't, because my rent was due in 9 days. And pride is a luxury you cannot afford when you're buying off-brand cereal. Mia, as it turned out, was the greatest human being I had ever met. She was small and round-cheeked, and had her mother's dark eyes and absolutely none of her mother's restraint. She greeted me on my first morning by handing me a crayon drawing of what she claimed was a dog but was visually a purple rectangle with legs. She called it Biscuit. She expected me to keep it. I kept it. I still have it, actually. Don't tell anyone. Within a week, Mia had decided I was her best friend, her personal jungle gym, and her preferred audience for a performance art piece she called dancing, but which was really just spinning until she fell down. I let her perform it 17 times in a row one afternoon. I clapped every single time. I am not ashamed. Elena, for her part, was almost never home before 8 in the evening. When she moved through the apartment like a ghost who had very strong opinions about the dishwasher being loaded correctly. She didn't ignore Mia exactly. She'd crouch down to her level with this careful, concentrated look, like she was solving a problem she loved but didn't entirely understand. She'd hold Mia's small face in both hands and press a single kiss to her forehead, and something soft and undefended would move across Elena's face. And then she'd straighten up and it would be gone. I told myself not to notice. I noticed. 3 months in, things changed. Elena's business dealings, which I had not been hired to understand, apparently, involved someone she had trusted, who no longer deserved it. I didn't know the details. What I knew was that there were phone calls she took in hushed tones on the balcony. A man I didn't recognize standing outside the building 2 days in a row. And one Thursday evening, a phone call that made Elena go very still at the kitchen counter in a way that made every hair on my neck stand up. She came to me after. I need you to take Mia somewhere, she said. Her voice was controlled, but only just. Somewhere safe. Tonight. Don't use your phone. Don't tell anyone where you're going. I stared at her. Elena, please, and that word coming from her cracked something open. She never said please. She said things like ensure and confirm, and by end of day, please was not in Elena Choi's vocabulary. Her hand was shaking, just slightly. I took Mia. I packed a bag in 12 minutes. I put Biscuit the purple rectangle drawing in the front pocket. I buckled Mia into the back seat of my ancient Hyundai while she happily narrated a story about a frog she'd seen on TV. I drove 4 hours north to my aunt's house in the mountains, where the Wi-Fi was terrible and the nearest neighbor kept chickens and strong opinions about the government. Elena said she'd contact me in 3 days. 3 days passed, then a week. Then the news said her company had collapsed under fraud allegations. Her name was everywhere, and then she vanished. I called the number she'd given me, disconnected. I waited some more, and then Mia climbed into my lap, pressed her crayon drawing against my chest, and said in her small, certain voice, "Maya, home." I looked down at her. I looked at my phone. I looked at the door. "Yeah, baby," I said quietly. "Okay." That was 3 years ago. Here's what nobody tells you about running away with a 2-year-old. They turn 5 eventually, and 5-year-olds have opinions. Loud ones about everything. Mia, by age 5, had informed me on separate occasions that our apartment was too brown. My cooking was okay, but not great, and that she wanted a dog named Biscuit too, after the legendary drawing, which had now been framed and hung above her bed like a family portrait. I had become, without any formal training or legal documentation, somebody's mother. This was not on the vision board either. My Aunt Cora, God bless her and her chickens, had helped me settle in the small town of Edenvale, population 4,000 and exactly one Filipino-run bakery that saved my soul every Saturday morning. I got a job at the local library. I registered Mia at preschool under my last name, which I told myself was practical, protective, necessary. I did not let myself think about Elena. I tried anyway. The truth was that she lived in the back of my mind like furniture you've rearranged, but can still feel in the dark. The way she'd looked at Mia, the shake in her hand, that single cracked please. I'd Googled her exactly twice in 3 years, which was either impressive self-control or, more likely, cowardice. Both times I found nothing. No company, no profile. Like she'd been scrubbed clean from the internet. I told myself she was fine. I told myself a lot of things at 2 a.m. She found us on a Wednesday. Of course it was a Wednesday, not a Friday when I was wearing a decent shirt. A Wednesday, which meant I was in the library storage room in an oversized flannel with a small jam stain. I hadn't noticed. Reorganizing donated books. Operating on the confident assumption that absolutely nothing would happen today. I heard the library door open. I heard Cressida at the front desk say, "Can I help you?" in her polite, neutral librarian voice. And then I heard a voice I had not heard in 3 years say, quietly, "I'm looking for someone." My body knew before my brain did. My brain said, "Coincidence." My body said, "Drop the book because your hands have stopped working." I stepped out of the storage room. Elena Choi was standing at the front desk. She was, and I want to be precise, exactly the same and completely different. Same dark eyes. Same posture that had never once slouched and never would. But her hair was longer. Faint shadows under her eyes that spoke of years, not weeks. She looked like someone who had been searching for a very long time and had developed very good shoes for it. She turned. Our eyes met. The silence that followed was so thick you could have laminated it, which felt honestly appropriate for her. "Maya," she said. "Hi." I said, "Brilliant, outstanding, 3 years, and that's what I produced." Her jaw was tight. Something that had been held very carefully for a very long time cracked open, just at the edges. "Where is she?" she said. Not a question. "School," I said. "She gets out at 2. Elena nodded once. That precise. controlled nod that absolutely did not hide the way her breath stuttered. I've been looking, she said quietly, for 2 years and 8 months. I know. My voice was barely a sound. I didn't know if you were. I couldn't find any. I know. She stepped toward me, then stopped, like she was managing something carefully. She's okay? She's perfect, I said. She talks constantly. She has opinions about everything. She named her stuffed frog Senator Jumps-a-Lot entirely on her own. I had no part in that. Something broke across Elena's face. Not dramatically, just a small private breaking, the kind that happens quietly when relief finally arrives after years of not arriving. She laughed, short and disbelieving, and it sounded like the first real laugh she'd had in a long time. I wanted to hug her. I did not because I had jam on my shirt, and also I had technically taken her child across state lines. We sat in the library until 2 o'clock. I explained everything. She explained everything. The fraud case, going underground to collect evidence, the investigators she'd hired once she was clear, the years of paper trails that had led her to this very brown small town. At 2:15, Mia walked through the library door, saw me, then stopped. Her small head tilted. She looked at Elena for a long, serious moment. Elena looked back at her like she was seeing a miracle she hadn't let herself believe in. "You look like my pictures," Mia said finally in her most matter-of-fact voice. Elena blinked. "Your pictures?" Mia turned to me accusingly. "Maya, you said I couldn't have a dog, but you kept Mama's picture in your drawer. That's a double standard." I opened my mouth, closed it. Elena looked at me. I looked at the ceiling. "I can't explain," I said. "Mama," Mia said simply and walked directly into Elena's arms like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like the last 3 years were simply a gap to be closed rather than a wound. Elena held her daughter with both arms, eyes shut tight, and didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally looked up, her eyes found mine over Mia's head. There was no anger in them. There was something else, something that looked, in the soft afternoon light of a small-town library, very much like the beginning of something. She didn't leave Edenvale. She stayed. Some evenings, after Mia was asleep, we'd sit on my 2-brown couch with tea. She had opinions about tea, which I found deeply irritating and incredibly endearing. And we'd talk slowly, carefully. The way you talk to someone when you're both a little afraid of what comes next and a little more afraid of missing it. One night she reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, gently, like she'd been thinking about doing it for a while. "Thank you," she said simply. "You kept her safe. You kept her whole." I covered her hand with mine. Outside, the evening was settling into dark blue quiet. Somewhere in the next room, a 5-year-old with her mother's eyes slept peacefully. A purple rectangle drawing pinned above her. A frog named Senator Jumps-a-Lot tucked under her arm. And sitting in the warm lamplight, hands held between us like something finally returned to where it belonged. I thought, yeah, this was always where it was going. Elena Choi did not leave Edenvale. I want you to understand how significant that is. This was a woman who had a laminated 17-page document with table of contents for childcare. A woman whose previous apartment had heated floors and a wine fridge that probably cost more than my entire education. And she stayed in Edenvale. Population 4,000. One bakery. Aunt Cora's chickens. She rented a small house 2 streets from mine. I know because I drove past it approximately 4 times before admitting to myself what I was doing and going home. Mia naturally had 0 adjustment period. By day 3, she was referring to Elena as my mama, who I found at the library. To anyone who would listen, including the checkout woman at the grocery store, a stranger's dog, and Senator Jumps-a-Lot, Elena received this information every time with the same expression. Something between overwhelmed and quietly undone, and I watched her learn, slowly, how to receive love from a 5-year-old who gave it like she had absolutely nothing to lose. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was also deeply inconvenient for my heart, which had, apparently, not received the memo that I was supposed to be healing from a breakup and not developing entirely new feelings for a woman who organized her spice rack alphabetically. I found that out because I was in her kitchen. She'd invited me for dinner. Casual, she said. Just to talk, she said. I showed up in a decent shirt with no jam stains this time, which felt like personal growth. Her kitchen smelled like something I couldn't name but immediately associated with warmth. She was standing at the stove, sleek black hair in a loose braid over one shoulder the first time. I'd seen it not perfectly straight, wearing a gray sweater that had somehow managed to look expensive, despite being clearly soft and worn. She looked different here, less like a CEO, more like a person. I stood in the doorway, probably 3 seconds too long. You're staring, she said, without turning around. I'm observing, I said. There's a difference. She turned then. Something in her expression did a complicated, little thing before settling back into composure. Sit down, Maya. I sat down. I noticed the spice rack. I could not help myself. Did you alphabetize those? It's logical. Elena, the cumin is between the cardamom and the dill, alphabetically. That is not how cooking works. And yet, the food will still be good. She turned back to the stove with the particular serenity of someone who has never once doubted themselves and does not intend to start now. The food was devastatingly excellent. We sat across from each other with wine she'd chosen with the same focused consideration. She gave everything and we talked, really talked. She told me about the 3 years, the investigation, going underground, the slow, careful rebuilding of her life and her name. She told it plainly, without self-pity, but I heard what lived underneath. The fear, the isolation, the specific agony of not knowing if Mia was warm and fed and laughing. Were you angry at me? I asked quietly. For taking her? She was quiet for a moment. She turned her wine glass slowly. No, she said finally. You did exactly what I asked you to do. And then, when I disappeared, you did what I couldn't. A pause. You stayed. I didn't know what to do with that. I did what I always do when I don't know what to do with something. I deflected. Well, I said lightly. She was very persuasive. She handed me a crayon drawing and I simply never recovered. Elena smiled. A real one, not the small controlled curve I'd seen occasionally before. A full, genuine, slightly helpless smile that did something catastrophic to her sharp features. And something equally catastrophic to my chest. I looked at my wine. The evening ended at the door. We stood there a moment too long, the way people do when neither of them wants to be the one to end something good. Thank you for dinner, I said. Thank you for staying, she said, and I knew she didn't mean for dinner. I walked home in the cool night air and had a very serious conversation with myself that went approximately like this. Maya, no. She is Mia's mother. You live 2 streets away. This is complicated. Do not. My heart said already did. It happened on a Sunday. Sundays in Edenvale had become a thing without anyone officially declaring them a thing. Elena would come over in the morning, which meant Mia woke up demanding pancakes with the urgency of someone who had never once missed a meal in her life. I would make the pancakes. Elena would supervise the pancakes. I would tell her the supervision was unnecessary. She would rearrange my spatulas. I would give up. We had a routine. The 3 of us, it had arrived quietly and installed itself completely before any of us thought to question it. This particular Sunday, Mia had been fed, had performed an original theatrical production about a princess and a frog named Senator Jumps-a-Lot II, and had then fallen asleep on the couch in the specific boneless way children sleep. Like their bones have simply opted out. Elena and I sat on the back porch steps. The afternoon was warm and unhurried. Aunt Cora's chickens were audible somewhere in the distance. The mountains sat quietly where they always were. "Can I tell you something?" Elena said. Her voice was different. That careful, controlled tone she always used had something underneath it. Something that had been waiting for a quiet Sunday to come out. "Always," I said. She turned to look at me. Porcelain face in the afternoon sun, shadows gone from under her dark eyes for the first time since she'd arrived. Her sleek black hair loose today, falling over both shoulders. She looked, I thought, like someone who had found the thing they'd been looking for and was still slightly afraid it might disappear. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly. "I know how to run a company. I know how to rebuild one from the ground up. I know how to find one person in a town of 4,000. A pause. I don't know how to tell someone that somewhere between watching her mother my daughter and making terrible tea and laughing at my alphabetized spice rack." She stopped. My heart was doing something medically concerning. "Elena," I said softly. "I fell in love with you," she said simply, plainly. The way she said everything, like the truth was always the most efficient option. "I don't know when exactly. I don't have a time stamp." A laugh escaped me, short and startled and helplessly fond. "Of course you want a time stamp. It would be useful data." "Elena." I reached over and took her hand. Her fingers were cool, like always. I held them anyway. "For what it's worth," I said, "I think it was the spice rack for me." She looked at me. The spice rack, the absolute confidence, the wrongness, the refusal to apologize for it. I turned to face her properly. That's when I knew I was in serious trouble. Something softened across her face. That rare, unguarded thing I'd only seen directed at Mia, now directed at me. Full and deliberate and terrifying in its sincerity. "Maya," she said quietly. "I know," I said. "Me too. A lot." For a while, she reached up and tucked a strand of my wavy hair behind my ear. Slowly, like she'd been wanting to for longer than she was ready to say. I leaned forward and kissed her. She went still for exactly 1 second, surprised, I think, despite everything, and then she kissed me back, warm and careful and certain, the way Elena Choi did everything. Her hand came to rest against my jaw, and I felt her exhale against my lips like something she'd been holding could finally go. We broke apart when Mia appeared in the doorway behind us. Blanket dragging, hair catastrophically sideways from sleep. She looked at us, looked at our joined hands, looked back up with the expression of someone whose plans have come together, precisely as intended. Finally, she said. Elena and I stared at her. "Mia," I said carefully, "what do you mean finally?" She shrugged with magnificent 5-year-old nonchalance. "I told Senator Jumpsalot you were going to kiss. He said it would take too long." She turned and disappeared back inside. "I want more juice." Elena looked at me. I looked at Elena. We both started laughing at the same time, the full, helpless, undignified kind that neither of us could have predicted when this all started. She pressed her forehead to mine. Outside, Aunt Cora's chickens were arguing about something. The mountains were right where they'd always been. Inside, a 5-year-old was demanding juice from a frog named Senator Jumpsalot with the calm authority of someone who had known all along exactly how this story would end. And sitting on the back porch, steps of a 2-brown apartment in a small mountain town, holding Elena Choi's cool hands in both of mine. I thought about a Thursday night 3 years ago when I had driven to the wrong apartment with a red velvet cake and watched my life fall apart. I thought about a cardboard box, a cold hallway, a green sweater. I thought about the ways the worst night of your life can quietly become the first page of the best story you never planned to tell. Yeah, I thought, leaning into her warmth, worth every single bit of it.